Hello everyone, welcome to Wall Street. We're right in front of Federal Hall, right below our friend President George Washington, the very first president of the United States of America. Let's take a walk around the history of this very intersection that's known all around the world, the intersection of Wall Street and Broad Street, right in front of the New York Stock Exchange, JP Morgan Bank Building, and Federal Hall. Well, let's take a step inside Federal Hall first, where was the place where this guy, George Washington, became president. Let's take a walk inside. So here's Federal Hall Memorial. This is a 360 video, so you can turn around any direction you would like, and you can see every perspective. So let's walk inside where George Washington was inaugurated. Thank you. Thank you. So look at this. We're right inside Federal Hall National Memorial. It's a national monument dedicated to the first president of the United States of America, President George Washington, who gained power right after the American Revolution, where they rebelled against the British. It's a gorgeous dome. Now, this structure did not exist back when George Washington became president in the 1700s. However, this was built on top of the original Federal Hall building. The original balcony you can see right in front of us, right over there. And that's where the balcony that George Washington accepted the presidency of the United States of America. He was surrounded by the other founding fathers, such as John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. They all stood there as crowds gathered all around in front in order to celebrate this new nation finally coming to being. Now, New York City for a while was the capital of the United States of America because the British handed over New York back to the Americans. Well, not back, to the Americans for the first time. They held it just a few years after the Revolution just to kind of ease away from the United States. And once the Americans finally took hold of this city, they made it the capital because it was the most powerful and most wealthy city of all the Union. So Washington actually stood there. Now, Washington, when he stood there, he only spoke a few words. He was actually extremely shy and nervous. He was very nervous for what was happening during the inauguration. He was actually very nervous to become president. He was really natural as a war leader, as a general, but when it came to presidency, he felt a bit kind of wary. Right next to him, also who was very nervous, was his vice president, John Adams, who was sweating like crazy and couldn't really gather his composure. Right over here, we have the stone commemorating the first inaugural day, which was April 30th, 1789. That's when George Washington took the oath of office for the President of the United States of America. Now, today, presidents, to be called president is a very big title. You're the head honcho of a country. The president is the most powerful person in the world, arguably. But president wasn't always seen as a word that was to denote great power. Now it's associated that way because the United States is the superpower of the world. Back then, president was actually used to put a peg down for whoever took that office. The president means the person who presides over a meeting. And the person who presides over a meeting is a person who's not really in power. He's kind of the chaperone to make sure that the meeting is all good and orderly. So the president wasn't actually supposed to be nowhere near as powerful as the president is today. Just a little fun fact about presidents. Let's walk around, let me show you a little bit more. So lots of memorabilia in his honor. And here we're going to see the scene of Inauguration Day. Here are some portraits of George Washington. Very tall man, about 6'3", 6'2", 6'3", maybe even a little bit taller than that. And right here is how the original Federal Hall looked like. There's one that looks almost exactly the same in Philadelphia, which I've actually done a video before of, if you want to check it out. And this is the scene of the first inauguration. Right in front of us, the painting of George Washington touching the Bible, taking the oath of office. All around him is the Vice President, John Adams over there, Thomas Jefferson, John Hancock, and etc. Many, many other famous people, Benjamin Franklin. Right behind them, you can see the Trinity Church, which was still existent to that day. Here's a replica of George Washington's presidential desk. Now, George Washington didn't really know what to do that first year as president because the office never really existed. The country didn't really exist. There was a lot of pressure on his shoulders in order to set the tone for what the United States will become. And I think the best example of him setting the tone for what the U.S. will become is him deciding to only run for 2 terms as president for a total of 8 years. He said that he'd rather not keep on running because he doesn't want to run for life. And at that time, he could have ran for life because there was no president to do so before. But he set the precedent with the C, not with the S, to only run for a maximum of 2 terms. That came into law shortly after the presidency of FDR in order to limit presidencies by law. But back then, George Washington took a very bold step and said to limit his own power. So let's take a walk back into Wall Street and talk a little bit more about Wall Street. So right over here is a statue of George Washington.
We gotta go see it.
So right over here we have a few major buildings. Of course we just visited the Federal Hall, but right in front of us we have the New York Stock Exchange. New York Stock Exchange is the financial institution of the United States of America, is one of the reasons why the U.S. is a financial powerhouse on the world stage. This actually started in a coffee shop. While George Washington was taking oath of office, people like Alexander Hamilton and many of the original founders of the New York Stock Exchange met up at the Taunting Coffee House, only a block or 2 away, trading stocks. Most stocks were always traded in coffee houses all around the West, so that was fairly normal. But it's funny to think of a massive financial institution starting from a place where you drink your brew. That's funny. All right, so right over here has also been the scene of the Occupy Wall Street movement. 2011, thousands of people gathered here with their tents, opposing the financial institutions that kind of have gone unwieldy since then. However, let's go back to 1920. In 1920, a horse and carriage rode right here in the center. It rode right here in the center, and it was rather odd because it had a lot of cargo right in the back. And all that cargo it had in the back was suspicious. And the guy just stood there for a few minutes. People continued on their normal day. It was 12 noon, so people were starting to get ready to go out for lunch. And suddenly, that cargo on the horse and carriage exploded all around and had shrapnel flying all around Wall Street. Hundreds of pounds, hundreds tons of pounds of shrapnel were in that cargo with tons of dynamite to push that shrapnel to the buildings all around. 38 people died almost instantly. Over 140 people were seriously injured. Curtains were on fire over there in the New York Stock Exchange. Federal Hall got a few dents in its stonework, and also the JP Morgan was damaged. Now, who was the assailant in this attack? Well, the strange thing is, for a terrorist attack, no one took responsibility. No one claimed that they did it. So they had to figure out who. The suspects were Italian anarchists, who were the main targets on the US political stage because a lot of people didn't like that movement that was happening both here and in Italy. So they actually never found out who was implicated. I have the full story on Facebook Live. I'll put the link in the comments below. But you can still see scars from the actual attacks. Let's check it out. So right over here, we can see scars from the actual attacks of the 1920 bombings. Now, you don't see these scars on the other buildings. You don't see them in the Stock Exchange. You don't see them in Federal Hall. You see it right here. Now, one of the major theories, and a lot of people think this is pretty damn accurate, that the main target was supposed to be JP Morgan Bank Building. Because JP Morgan was the center of finance. He was a powerful industrialist who basically ruled the country. This was the target. Now, why are these scars still here? Well, they actually asked JP Morgan why they're still here. And JP said, because I want to show them that this can't go down. Something random is happening here. I have no idea.
Back in 1920, we had one of the greatest...
I'm sorry. Oh, people are just having a race. Move down here.
That's impressive. The Wall Street bombings happened in 1920.
It's just people sprinting. You always see the most random things in New York City. So JP Morgan said, I want people to know that no one can take down this building. Paraphrase quote. And no one can. It's a massive building. The building barely had a scratch besides those dents. And his institution continued. It's now one of the most powerful banks in the world, JP Morgan and Chase. And yeah, he was truly infallible at that time. He came under the test again in 1929 when the stock market crashed, and a lot of people put him to blame. But then again, he survived through all that. Now, one last thing before we finish this video is, why is it called Wall Street? Well, there's no wall here, but there used to be. Back in the 1600s, the Dutch constructed a wall on the very upper boundaries of New Amsterdam. All below this was originally Dutch controlled. First Europeans to really control this area. And they wanted to protect New Amsterdam from the incoming Native Americans and also from the British or any other European power that decided to attack this island. The wall stood here, and you can see remnants of the wall right below our feet. Right over here is remnants of the wall. Right below these bricks, which they recently covered up, you can actually see parts of the wood. Go a little bit further down Wall Street, you'll be able to see parts of the wood from here. It's kind of crazy to think about. So that is the wall of Wall Street. Right over there is Trinity Church, which has the gravestone of Alexander Hamilton. And this is Broad Street with the New York Stock Exchange. Let's take a look from the front. So you can imagine how this came from a coffee shop to a major, massive building known all around the world. I think that goes to show the power of coffee. Speaking of which, that's exactly what I'm going to do today. Thank you everyone so much for tuning in. This is a 360 video. Share this video with any friends and family. And if you're supporting Urbanists and getting access to these videos before everyone else does, Thank you so much for supporting. I really appreciate it. Keep being awesome and always keep on exploring. Have a great day, everyone.